In recent years, the number of Chinese students coming to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign skyrocketed. In 2007, a total of 950 mainland Chinese students enrolled at the university. By spring 2016, this number has reached around 5,000 students. However, the presence of Chinese students on campus isn't a phenomenon that emerged out of thin air. The first group of Chinese students came to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1907. The president of the university from 1904 to 1920, Edmund James, wrote several letters to the United States government about using the Boxer indemnity to fund Chinese students to study in the United States.
And James is largely responsible for converting a land-grant university into a substantial, if not great, American university. And part of that was his openness to various nationalities, various types of study, including China, the study of Chinese, being welcoming to Chinese students. So it's a very optimistic and rewarding period in Sino-American relations.
His successor, David Kinley, also had a keen interest in Chinese students. During the first year of his presidency, the number of Chinese students at the university increased from 49 to 82. The University of Illinois became the center of Chinese student activities in the Midwest. The annual conference of the Midwest section of Chinese Students Alliance was held twice at the university, first in 1913 and again in 1918. In the conference program of 1913, there were not only business meetings held, but also ladies' tennis singles competition and the Chinese Bazaar. Young China was a journal created by the Publicity Bureau of the Chinese students in 1919. It had 3 journals per academic year. In the journals, they commented on China's international relationships, Chinese women's civil rights, and American liquor going to China.
I don't know whether, I would imagine, but I can't say for sure, that students who are more world-minded and open to new opportunities would welcome the Chinese students. For example, there was something called Cosmos Club, and there the Americans who went there tended to be somewhat offbeat, they're not the type of people who wanted to join either fraternities or sororities.
Yeah.
They were interested in meeting people, and I think they would have found the Chinese students very welcoming, and they would have been very welcoming.
Mo Xuangyue was a representative of Chinese alumni's close relation with their alma mater. Mr. Mo graduated from College of Agriculture in 1913 and went back to Shanghai to open a cotton spinning company in 1914. His connection with the university after graduation mainly relied on letters with the Alumni Association and a journal called Alumni Quarterly and Fortnightly Notes. This journal shared the campus news with Mr. Mo.
The life of Chinese students at the University of Illinois from 1945 to 1956 is characterized by financial difficulties in the 1940s and suspicion under McCarthyism in the 1950s. The financial situation in China in 1948 resulted in an increase of inflation, which cut most of the financial resources of Chinese students in the United States. On September 1948, the Chinese embassy issued a letter urging students to return immediately with government aid before the end of the year. To help Chinese students, the United States Congress passed several acts to appropriate emergency aid to the Chinese students. At the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Chinese students cabled their government asking for monetary support on September. They hoped that the request could at least extend their stay in the school. However, a number of them were still forced to return. Peter Tang Cao told Daily Illini before returning to China, "I will miss a lot of things here. I think most of the friendships formed here. There's something always to remember." The Chinese students faced not only financial but also political pressure after the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. After the outbreak of Korean War in June 1950s, the US government banned almost all Chinese students from leaving the US, fearing that the students would go back home and contribute to the development of communist China. The Korean Water Act, passed in 1952, prevented an alien from leaving the country during the time of national emergency if his or her departure was found against the interests of the United States. On the other hand, the rise of McCarthyism disturbed the life of Chinese students on American campuses. In early 1951, the Chinese Student Christian Association at the University of Illinois was alleged to have been infiltrated by communist influence. The officers of the Immigration Service blacklisted students in the association who thereupon faced the threat of deportation. 11 Chinese students were even removed from the campus in handcuffs and put in jail in Chicago, only to be released later under the technical custody of the university officials. This action provoked strong protest among the Chinese students. Larry Chang wrote to Daily Illini on March 22, 1951, stating that it was unlikely for Chinese students to engage in subversive activities, and denouncing the policy towards the association as oversimplified and arbitrary. The danger of deportation passed only after the Attorney General Howard McGrath issued a promulgation which secured the legal status of Chinese students in the country. However, it also ordered all the Chinese students to report their whereabouts and occupations to Immigration Office every 3 months. It was only after the Geneva Peace Conference of 1954 that the US government began to allow Chinese students to return to their homeland in exchange for US citizens held by the Chinese government in mainland China. 2 University of Illinois students were allowed to return to China on April 5, 1954.
During the height of the Cold War, Chinese students in the United States were mainly from Taiwan. Students from Taiwan still recognize themselves as Chinese, unlike Taiwanese students today. In the poster of the 1970 welcome meeting of the Chinese Students Club, the background of the poster is the emblem of the Nationalist Party, which fled to Taiwan after it lost the Chinese Civil War against the Communist Party in 1949. The Chinese Students Club held social activities for Chinese students, and it adopted a membership system. The card-holding members of the Chinese Students Club enjoy discounts for all activities. During the 1970s, the Chinese Students Club not only served the Chinese students, but also actively introduced and promoted Chinese culture to the domestic student in the United States. In May 1970, it held an event called China Night. This event was described in the flyer as a rare occasion for the understanding and appreciation of Chinese art, cultural activities, philosophy, and Chinese way of life. The event featured featherball kicking, demonstrations of calligraphy, Chinese kung fu, and Latin dance. During this period, Christianity also played a very important role in the Chinese students' life. The Illini Chinese Christian Fellowship was also a very influential Chinese student organization. According to the 1979 flyer of the Illini Chinese Christian Fellowship, the organization had 2 faculty advisors, 5 departments, and more than 10 ministers. The main activities including Bible study, prayer night, family night, and a small group gathering. The fellowship not only proposed to promote Christianity among Chinese students, but also extended its help to day-to-day activities. In the 1977 journal, there was a hand-drawn map, very carefully depicting the places to buy food, textbooks, and clothes. This Illini Fellowship also promoted a connection between the Chinese students studying abroad through Christianity. In the 1971 poster of the summer retreat titled Christianity versus China, Holy Cross versus Me, a man's heart is connected to the country of China despite being physically far away. Chinese student community during the time period was also politically inclusive. Some Chinese students support the communist regime in mainland China. For example, the Chinese Affairs Study Group tried to introduce the Revolutionary War in China by showing a documentary called The Great Battle of China. The documentary title was printed in simplified Chinese characters, and the poster referred to the Chinese Civil War as the Liberation War.
When students from mainland China once again appeared on this campus, however, they were newcomers, as students from Taiwan had been representing the Chinese student population in the Cold War period. The Chinese Student Association was run by students from Taiwan at the time. Their official magazine, Champaign Monthly, gives an insight to this phenomenon in the early 1980s. In the issue of August 1982, there was an essay criticizing an article published on Daily 99. The Daily 99 article was titled Student Spies Silence Taiwanese Student Teachers. In this article, a professor of the university's law school expressed his concerns that there were student informants reporting Taiwanese students' activities to the Taiwanese government. Moreover, the article said that the Taiwanese government spied on students because it would crack down the Taiwanese independent movement. In the essay titled Chinese Students Criticize Inaccuracies in Spy Series, 3 Taiwanese students argued against the claims made by the Daily 99 article. They asked in a series of rhetorical questions. Does he know that the native Taiwanese, although using local dialect, are Chinese known as? Does he know that native Taiwanese are not ethnically different from Chinese who immigrated into Taiwan after 1945? That the Republic of China, with its history of 71 years, has the right to claim her orthodoxy even though the communists are now occupying the majority of the Chinese territory. Like in the 1970s, students from Taiwan represented themselves as Chinese students, and Chinese student organizations on campus were mainly run by Taiwanese students. President Richard Nixon's visit to China in 1972 marked a watershed in the United States-China relations. Education exchange between the two countries soon began after the historic event. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign was among the first few schools that visited China after the breakthrough.
You know, I went on and taught in Japan. Forget exactly the year, 76. I forget. It was after the Cultural Revolution. After Japan, I went to China. It was my first visit in China. And Westerners were still somewhat uncommon. I remember standing on a street corner in Beijing. I don't know why I was there, but a number of people gathered around. Oh, where are you from?
The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign was the first few universities to initiate exchange programs with their Chinese counterparts. The UI-China exchange program was designed in 1979, originally with Beijing and Fudan University. The program brought more visiting scholars than students to the university. In 1982, there were 61 visiting scholars on campus compared with some 40 students from mainland China. This was a phenomenon special to this time period. For example, Yang Naiwen came to the university in his 40s in the late 1980s.
我学英文学的比较晚，41岁才开始学。然后呢，到了一流的大学的时候，因为我勉勉强强的通过了那 VST 考试，就 Visiting Scholar Test， 所以国家给钱，那个是1个月400美金吧。所以我一开始呢，能够生活上没有什么困难，但是语言非常差。一开始上课的时候，我记得在一流大学那个叫 General Engineering 那个叫通用工程系， 上课的时候我只懂老师说的 Mr. 杨这几个字儿，其他都不懂。但是呢，我在技术上有些想法，就是我是个就是机械工程师，所以我比较喜欢上课，我喜欢做实验课。但是因为计算机跟英文的关系啊，在学术上没有太大的成就。虽然有些想法，但是没做到底。但是学了很多的这个文化上的东西，有关于科学管理。我当时就觉得好像中国不缺技术，缺的是技术方面的管理，所以学了很多那些东西。另外就是我比较喜欢交朋友。我在第1个月的时候就考了个驾照，我还买了一辆汽车，花400块钱买了一辆叫普利茅斯那个汽车，所以我能够经常的开着车去拜会一些朋友，这样把英文就算练起来了。我因为当时很多东西都不懂，但是呢，我觉得我要是不去教会啊，我很难融入那个社会，所以我去教会比较多。因为在学校里边呢，我有点自卑，英文不好，沟通上有问题。另外呢，因为我是访问学者，实际上还是属于学生也不是，学生的优势我没有，因为他们呢可能语言那关能过，另外他们对这个美国的这个教学比较熟悉，我都不熟。而且那教职员工呢，我也没有那么多的机会跟他们沟通，所以呢，我去教会比较多。去了教会呢，我觉得对我非常平等，而且我喜欢那样的东西。就是有的时候因为各种各样的原因呢，我心情不好的时候，我去了教会，出来以后心情就特别平静。那个就这点对我帮助很大。我很多朋友都是在教会认识。那会儿呢，大家有一个叫我们称叫老中老外，访问学者，还学生很少，因为那会儿都没钱，那个国家给钱才能有条件去，一般很少有，就是那学生自费的很少，自费的都得打工，因为那会儿的那个经济条件也没有差，所以呢，穿的衣服都是国内的。然后呢，对美国的这些社会啊、文化都不太了解。形容老中是什么样呢？穿越中国的青莲山，推个自行车，站在十字路口啊，东张西望的，不知道走哪条路，一般都骑自行车。所以跟美国人交流呢也比较难。那会儿呢，就是很多的这样访问学者呢，差不多都是要在美国待1年。然后那会儿挣大件儿，那个3个月给你一个大件儿，这样呢，你可以买一些什么电视机呀、电冰箱的，在国内买不着的东西。当时我们几个中国人住在一个 house 里头，那比较便宜了。我是2个人住的一个房间，每个人80块钱，400块钱呢，这国家的补贴应该是富有余。所以我后来就买了辆汽车，破汽车，400块钱。那个当时就拉着中国学生去采购，一到礼拜5的晚上，礼拜6，那都特别忙。所以我们自己做饭，所以很省钱。穿的衣服、吃的东西都觉得很满足了。那样，很多人最后不愿意回来，就因为美国的肉随便吃。那个他在那会儿在国内没有那么多的肉。我当时其实很辛苦，我一边做着那个，我有的时候还打一些零工啊，这个跟周围的邻居有些接触。我在周围邻居里边很有名，都知道有个 Super 杨，我能干很多，帮人剪草啊，整理那个车库什么都干了。但是我妈妈就是觉得说你在美国那灯红酒绿的社会，你要学会自律。当时我跟你说，我是很孝顺的， 可是我有的时候上厕所我都上不完，所以你知道我给我妈写信的时候，我用铅笔写的信，我蹲在厕所里都写了信，给我妈写，就是这哪有什么灯红酒绿啊？我现在很辛苦，当时就是那个感觉，非常，一个是 homesick， 另外这个中间赶上一个8964，有半年我每天都在掉眼泪，所以这也是我其中一个回国的这么一个原因。因为当时由于这件事情，我可以得到一个就是算一个很优惠的政策的 deferred departure， 但是我觉得好像我利用学生的血留在美国，我觉得这很没意思。
The past and present are tightly interconnected, and both entities combined helps uphold the future of China and America. With an abundance of Chinese students and perceptions that each student holds of the United States, it is pertinent to look at the Chinese view of America.
Okay, so my daily life would be waking up, going to classes, come back, hang out with my roommates, and I go to work out, maybe some other RSO events. And my favorite spot to study would be just in my bedroom because I have a desktop. I like bigger screen. Yeah. My roommates like to throw house parties sometimes, or I just go to other places like people's apartments, or the clubs on campus, Murphy's, Joe's, those kind of stuff. In my freshman year, I would say half of my friends are probably Indian Americans because I was really actively involved with this a cappella group called Avaz, Elana Avaz. And then the other half would probably be Chinese students because I lived in the dorm. But then moving on to sophomore year, and now I'm junior, I would say just maybe half and half American friends, half Chinese friends. Maybe a little bit more American friends, I would say.
It has been 109 years since the first group of Chinese students came to study at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Further, it's been 156 years since the first Chinese student has come to study in the United States. Chinese students have long been a part of American universities that pioneer in furthering education for one world and the free movement of ideas. But Chinese students' presence on American campuses has never evoked such a large controversy in American society as it does today. After looking at the past and the present of Chinese students on campus, we pose the question: how will the long-standing tradition of U.S.-China higher educational exchange continue in the future?